Subscribe, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I love seeing where
convoy departed the nation's most fortified gold installation under the cover of darkness. Official logs describe the mission as a routine supply transfer to a nearby depot, but even the first surviving document, a margin note in an internal ledger, discovered decades later, contradicts that story. The anonymous clerk wrote, "Third truck unverified. Manifest incomplete." It was dismissed as a clerical mistake. It shouldn't have been. The caravan rolled out at 2:14. Snow flurries reduced visibility. Wind cut across the road, and the guards later testified that the third truck's headlights seemed strangely dim, as if powered by a weaker generator. Nobody questioned it. Sealed orders were sacred in 1937. The convoy was scheduled to return by 4 o'clock. At 4:30, the gates remained closed, the road empty. Then came a telegraph delay. Hold gates. No entry. It carried the authentication code of Lieutenant Harrow, but Harrow later swore he'd never sent it, and that his code key had been locked in his desk all night. The convoy returned at 6:42. 2 trucks only. Mud clung to the lead driver's boots, not local soil. The second truck showed dust from a clay-rich region miles away from the official route. Someone tried to replace the original manifest with a sloppy carbon copy listing fewer items. Missing entirely was the notation for auxiliary container units, the code used for gold transport crates. No alarm was raised. No investigation recorded. In the following months, small discrepancies appeared in internal gold audits, 2 bars missing, then 5, then dozens. A 1938 internal memo, declassified much later, concluded variances likely associated with the December transfer. No mention of a missing truck. 3 guards filed encrypted complaints. Route altered, cargo shifted, 3rd unit detached. All 3 resigned within weeks. 1 disappeared from records entirely. Somewhere that night, something unauthorized left the installation, and the 3rd truck was never seen again. The first real crack in the official narrative emerged in 1952, during an internal review of pre-war security incidents. A board logistics officer stumbled across a sealed envelope labeled, "Irregular Transport Inquiry," archived without action. Inside were transcripts of interviews with 2 junior officers, who had been on duty the night of the convoy. Officer Carlin testified that at 3:10, he saw an unscheduled lantern signal near the southern fence line, 3 short flashes, 1 long. That pattern was used only for covert vehicle redirection. He reported it, and was told, "Log error. Forget it." Officer Dane reported seeing a truck pass through Gate C without headlamps. Gate C was not on the convoy's route. The envelope also contained a crude map scratched onto receipt paper. A dotted line led from the installation to an unmarked service road. Along the margin someone wrote, "Alternate path for Unit 3. Another clue surfaced in 1961 when a retired telegraph operator donated his equipment and notebooks to a small regional museum. Among them was a thin logbook containing fragments of messages from that December night. 1 garbled line, "Diverted south, new orders." Another, "Payload split, follow lane 2. Nothing like this appears in official archives. The installation insisted no alternate route existed at the time, but the biggest revelation came from a set of internal photographs, taken during a 1939 inventory inspection. One image shows a stack of gold crates, each marked with a 3-letter prefix. Historians later determined that at least 14 crates in the photo have markings inconsistent with the vault's standard sequence. Their numbers simply don't appear in later ledgers. The disappearance might have been dismissed as wartime shuffling, until testimony from Captain Holland surfaced. Recorded secretly in 1947, he stated, "There was a shipment that night. Not supplies, not tools. No one in our rank was supposed to know." When asked what it contained, he answered, "2 officers above me said it was bullion." Then one said something stranger. "It's already off the books." What could be off the books in the most controlled vault in the country, and who had authority to move it? The missing 3rd truck was no accident. It was a planned extraction. The next breakthrough came from a retired railway inspector named Clifton Marks. In 1974 he contacted a researcher claiming he had knowledge of the gold transfer that never returned. His story sounded absurd, until documents began supporting it. Marks said that on the very same night of the convoy's disappearance, a freight locomotive traveling through a rural junction made an unscheduled stop at 4:20. The engineer logged unidentified cargo loaded by armed men. His note included a detail too specific to dismiss: wooden crates, stenciled with metal codes. Heavy. 2 units. Those metal codes matched the misplaced crate numbers from the 1,939 photos. Marks added that a telegraph ordering the stop contained a routing string used only by Federal transport operations. How he knew that was unclear, but archivists later confirmed the pattern. The freight train traveled northeast toward an industrial warehouse complex rented at the time by a private metals refinery. Its ownership structure was layered, for shell companies, each dissolving within months. No payroll records. No shipment invoices. Only one surviving ledger, received, 2 units. Bulk metal. Temporary storage. After 1938 the warehouse was abandoned. Meanwhile, more witness accounts emerged. A former military driver recalled being instructed to avoid the South Road for 48 hours. A telegraph technician found a discarded message strip reading, "Convoy incomplete. Continue silence." A young cadet overheard senior officers arguing about the missing tonnage. The pattern became unavoidable. The gold didn't vanish, it moved along a second, hidden chain of custody. And yet, no investigation materialized. Why? Because during those years the reserve system underwent 2 massive audits, both extremely restricted. The final published totals matched expectations perfectly, but internal drafts tell a different story. One sheet, later recovered from a private archive, contains a crossed-out line reading, "Shortfall corrected via legacy reserves." What? Legacy reserves? None were reported to exist. This suggests the missing gold wasn't acknowledged, only compensated for. By the time the war began, the third truck had become a ghost. But new testimony hinted it didn't disappear alone. Someone high-ranking orchestrated the extraction. The next clues would come from the very men who guarded the installation. In 1985, a journalist obtained copies of suppressed guard testimonies from an anonymous source. The pages were brittle, stained, and stamped, not for release. They described events that contradicted every official statement. Guard Benton stated that shortly before the convoy left, he overheard 2 officers discussing a parallel manifest. One said, "Only the top sheets need matching. Nobody checks the carbon pages." Later, Benton noticed the third truck's cargo area sealed with a different type of rivets, smaller, polished, recently installed. Guard Rowe described a moment at the first checkpoint. Truck 3 didn't stop. It rolled through like they had special clearance. The checkpoint officer was reprimanded the next day, then transferred without explanation. Guard Kells claimed that when the convoy returned, the lead driver whispered, "They won't find it." When Kells asked what he meant, the driver replied, "Just sign off. End your shift." One testimony stood out. An officer reported that the installation's telegraph room received an off-record message hours after the convoy's return. Receipt confirmed. Auxiliary units delivered. The phrase, "auxiliary units," appears nowhere in official transfer logs, except in the lost manifest page referencing gold crates. Compiling the testimonies produced a disturbing timeline. 040. Last-minute briefing held behind closed doors. 110. Third truck receives undocumented cargo modification. 2:14. Convoy departs. 3:10. Lantern signal observed at south fence. 3:30. Convoy splits onto unauthorized route. 4:20. Cargo transferred to freight train. 6:42. 2 trucks return. Every piece of evidence supports a coordinated extraction using both military and civilian transport corridors. But the operation needed something else: silence. Shortly after giving testimony, Benton and Rowe died in unrelated accidents. Kells retired early, later telling a neighbor, "We were told the gold was safer if nobody knew where it was." The phrase, "safer," raised questions. Safe from whom? Foreign threats, political instability, internal corruption, or was it simply removed so it could never be audited again? Only one set of documents offered a possible answer, and they came from deep inside the vault commander's office. The final pieces fell into place when researchers uncovered a series of coded correspondence between senior officers, from late 1937 to mid-1938. The letters were preserved accidentally, misfiled inside a weather dossier. Their tone is cautious but unmistakably tense. One message reads, "Primary extraction successful. Secondary concealment ongoing. Auditors unaware." Another warns, "External committee may request inspection. Prepare alternative tallies." A third contains the most revealing line, "If the gold remains centralized, political risk increases." Distributed reserve preferred. Distributed reserve, an unofficial, decentralized stash of bullion, hidden across multiple private sites. The implication is staggering. The missing caravan wasn't stolen. It was relocated intentionally. A memo written in red pencil mentions contingency preservation, a phrase historians interpret as a plan to safeguard national assets in case of economic collapse. But other notes hint at something less noble: civil operators compensated, records erased, chain of custody severed. There is even a draft order instructing officers to avoid referencing the third unit in future tallies. Finally, the last letter in the sequence reads, "Completion achieved. Transport cell dissolved." This correspondence never existed. No recovery attempt was documented. No accounting correction occurred. No public explanation was given. The disappeared gold simply vanished into a network of untraceable warehouses, private refineries, and unknown intermediaries, all created for one night's operation. By the 1950s, every key witness had been reassigned, retired, or removed. By the 1960s, the third truck had become an unofficial myth. By the 1980s, even the rumors were fading. Yet the documents, testimonies, and fragmented telegraphs form an unbroken chain, a parallel manifest, a diverted convoy, a midnight transfer, a concealed reserve. The robbery of Fort Knox never happened, because it wasn't a robbery. It was an authorized disappearance. And the true location of the missing gold has never been found. The deeper researchers dug, the more it became clear that the vanished gold wasn't just hidden, it was intentionally woven into an invisible financial network that operated parallel to official institutions. This shadow system emerges most clearly from a set of accounting drafts discovered in the archives of a now defunct auditing bureau. The drafts contain crossed-out sums, unexplained corrections, and notations like "refer to contingency pool" and "match to unregistered bullion." Nowhere in the bureau's mandate did the phrase "unregistered bullion" exist. One draft stands out, a table listing gold reserves by facility. Every line matches public records, except one. Beneath the table, in faint pencil, a formula appears: total equals reported plus secured external. The term, secured external, never appears again. Scholars believe it was an internal euphemism for the missing gold, bullion intentionally held outside all official accounts. Another clue arose from a 1940s financial review by a private metallurgical firm contracted to test purity levels of reserve bars. While reviewing archives decades later, a historian noticed that early test samples were cataloged in sets of 10, except one entry showing 12 bars. The extra 2 samples were noted as off-site inventory, yet no facility name was listed. What's more, the chemical fingerprint of those 2 bars did not match the smelting patterns of any registered mint of the era. Their composition matched pre-1937 refinery techniques, and likely the crate seen in the 1939 inspection photos. Then there were the officers' journals, private, never intended for disclosure. In one worn notebook, a commander wrote bitterly, "We protect gold that isn't here. We count bars we do not see." In another, new instructions, "Never discuss the old shipment. Never mention the third route." The entries suggest a quiet resentment among some officers who knew the truth, but were forced into a lifetime of silence. The most damning piece surfaced in 1991, when a researcher reviewing shipping documents from the Tennessee Valley's wartime construction boom found a confounding invoice: payment rendered in high-purity metal, origin unlisted. Attached was a receipt for metallic units delivered in sealed crates. The crate numbers matched early 1938 inventory sheets, exactly the period when the missing gold would have been moved again. If that invoice is genuine, the bullion may have been used as covert financing for wartime infrastructure projects, completely outside congressional oversight. A hidden reserve funding hidden operations. Confronted with these findings, several retired officials finally spoke off record. One stated, "People always assumed the gold was stolen. It wasn't theft. It was policy that could never be admitted." Another added, "The fewer who knew, the safer the country stayed." But the most cryptic comment came from a former intelligence liaison.